This episode of The Unstarving Musician is sponsored by Liner Notes. Learn from the hundreds of musicians and industry pros I've spoken with for The Unstarving Musician on topics such as marketing, songwriting, touring, sync licensing, and much more. Sign up for Liner Notes. Liner Notes is an email newsletter from yours truly in which I share some of the best knowledge gems garnered from the many conversations featured on The Unstarving Musician. You'll also be privy to the latest podcast episodes and Liner Notes subscriber exclusives. Sign up at unstarvingmusician.com. It's free and you can unsubscribe at any time. This is The Unstarving Musician. I'm Robonzo. This is my podcast. It features conversations with independent music artists and industry professionals with occasional special topic episodes featuring yours truly. A glimpse into the minds of my varied guests, all intended to help independent music artists better understand the marketing, business, and creative processes that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. One of the best voices in rock has been used to describe J.R. Richards. He's the former singer of Dishwalla, one of my favorite bands to emerge out of the 90s, and he's my guest for this episode. Welcome to another episode. I forgot to say that. What are you doing? How are you doing? How are you listening to me? What are you wearing? These are the things I wonder about, I imagine, when you're listening. Thank you for tuning in. Richards has sold millions of records, written some chart-topping hits, and has toured all over the world. Perhaps his most noteworthy accomplishment was writing Counting Blue Cars, which he performed and recorded with Dishwalla. That song won the Billboard Award for Rock Song of the Year in 1996 and 2 ASCAP awards for Song of the Year in both 97 and 98. So I was interviewed, we'll get back to JR here in a second, I was interviewed for a podcast called Set Lusting with Bruce, which will come out in a couple of months, but it was fun. Yeah, you can find it at Set Lusting Bruce, the Bruce Springsteen fan podcast. Well, I'm having trouble talking this afternoon. With Jesse Jackson. That sounds like a MTV VJ name. I think it might have been. Maybe. No, it sounds like a politician. A religious leader. He's not one of those. But yeah, it was a good time. And I found him on LinkedIn, and I happened to have seen Bruce in his early days. I'm not a super fan, but he talked to me anyway. We talked about the Rolling Stones and Bruce and some other things. We talked about the podcast. But anyway, I'll share that with you when it comes out. You should check out his podcast, though. It's pretty cool. And I have some upcoming shows. If you happen to be in Querétaro or are thinking of coming here to check out a vacation or maybe an expat destination, I'm going to be with my new Robonzo Lalo trio at Chez Moi Saturday the 28th. That's in about a week. And then I've got a house concert on Day of the Dead, the 2nd of November. That's in the Centro Histórico de Querétaro. And then I'll be playing the Querétaro Blues Festival on the 4th of November. And then we've got a house concert in San Miguel de Allende at a beautiful little home amphitheater. And then Robonzo's Undercover Blues at Moser on Thursday the 9th of November. I'll be playing drums at most of those. The first one I mentioned, the Robonzo Lalo Trio, I will be singing. That's an acoustic 80s, 90s acoustic cover band. I'm excited about that. Work on my vocal chops. You can find all of my gigs at robonzo.com, which is powered by Bandzoogle. Supporters of the podcast, like you, dear listener, if you're looking for a website and a way to support The Unstarving Musician, go to bandzoogle.com and use the promo code Robonzo to get 15% off your first year. Bandzoogle really has everything you need to promote and sell your music, keep your fans, supporters informed. You can sell merch. They have EPK templates, crowdfunding templates, email and social features for connecting. Yeah, man, visit bandzoogle.com and use the promo code Robonzo, ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. And by the way, on another topic, if you happen to be depressed by all the horrors going on in the world, and all the horror that is the news, there's a lot to be freaked out about. You can always contact me if you need someone to talk to, but what I really recommend is a little news sobriety. And by that I mean turn it off, shut it off for a week. You'll be surprised at how much better you feel. And, surprisingly, you can still stay informed of the major headlines without reading much of anything. People will just tell you. I have like a family thread where I get the all the headlines. So, yes, try that out. So, J.R. Richards, he's recorded a few solo albums and is on the cusp of releasing his next one, which will be his 10th in his career, including those that he did with Dishwalla, which I believe there were 5 of those. Great records. A funny thing, when I talked to him, I didn't tell him this, but my new little acoustic trio that does 80s, 90s covers has worked up Counting Blue Cars. My guitar player actually asked me to make a video of us doing it and sending it to him. I'm not sure that's going to happen. I didn't tell JR about it. We didn't have time. I thought about it, but I played the song in other bands. I've sang it pretty much every time I've ever played it. I love the guy's voice. I wish I could sing like him. He is an amazing singer. I was telling my wife, he sounds strikingly like a polished version of Bono. No knock on Bono, though. He's a great singer. But yeah, he's all that in a bag of chips with his voice. So I only recently became acquainted with his solo work because I was looking for an acoustic cover of Counting Blue Cars for that project I mentioned. And I found an acoustic cover, but when I saw the singer on that version, it occurred to me that it wasn't the original guy. So down the rabbit hole I went. I don't know who the new singer is. He's good, but I'm definitely partial to JR's voice. So I found his solo work, his website, and a lot of other stuff about him I never knew. I loved Dishwalla's first 2 albums, especially that second one, and I've been revisiting their others and JR's work recently. Really good stuff. He even has a holiday album. I'm a holiday music nerd, so I'm looking forward to hearing that for the holiday season, which is around the corner, kids. I said it. I'm not what you'd call a super fan of Dishwalla. I did lose track of him. I lost track of the band after they stopped releasing new stuff, and because of what music has become or what it became at that time, I just really didn't know much about the band other than their music was amazing. And yeah, they were an influence for sure. I am a big fan, though, so I was stoked when JR agreed to an interview, and it was kind of weird speaking with him. The time passed so quickly, and I spent the majority of our time nerding out with him about e-commerce, the importance of email lists, and other stuff that I typically pursue on the podcast for you guys. So I ended up with several questions that we never got to. And the other thing, he's like a normal person. He's like a dad and a husband, a very talented normal person, but turns out he's just a guy, which was refreshing. But yeah, it was kind of strange. It just went by really fast, and I was super excited to talk to him. So I don't know what I expected, but I enjoyed it. He was as nice and humble as any other indie musician I've ever spoken with for the podcast, and was that way from the outset when I first contacted him. So we talk about Dishwalla, his forthcoming record, email marketing and e-commerce, touring, adapting to changes in music, Spotify discovery mode, something he's pretty into, some of his work as a producer, what he's got cooking in the near future, and more. And there was so much more we could have talked about. Maybe I can get him back on someday. You should check out his website, jrrichardsmusic.com. There will be a link in the show notes, but that's pretty easy to remember. You can find out everything he's doing there. So, yes, please enjoy my conversation with J.R. Richards, the original singer of Dishwalla.
Hey, Roberto.
How you doing?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I was just going to check and see if you were having trouble getting on. I thought, well, maybe I'll see if I can text him. Good. Are you in Oxford, England?
I am just west of Oxford, about 20 minutes.
Yep. I gathered that's where you live.
I do. My wife and I have been here for about 8 years now.
Cool. Were you in the U.S. before that?
Yes, we were in California.
Is she English?
That. Yes, she is.
Very cool.
She's more Scottish than she is. She's like a Scot with a posh English accent.
I like the Scots.
Yeah, me too. We were married in Scotland, so we love Scotland. We try to get up to the Highlands whenever we can.
Oh, how nice! Where? Not that I'll necessarily know where you're going to tell me, but where did you get married there?
We were married in Kyle of Loch Alsh, and there's a castle there that's out in in Loch Alsh that has a bridge that kind of goes out to it. It's called Eilean Donnan Castle. So we were married in the castle, in a loch in the Highlands,
Sounds
Scotland.
amazing.
Yeah,
Sounds
it, it,
amazing.
it's pretty awesome.
I have been to Inverness.
Have you?
Yeah, it's been a
Okay.
while. We went for my wife has a coworker that she's from there, and we went for a wedding years ago, and yeah, it was fun. It was a short trip there, but it was a kind of a nice vacation for us. We ended up going to Paris for about 10 days afterwards for the rest of our trip, and
Nice.
her fiance then husband um, gave us his flat to stay in Paris, right by the Champs Elysees, when we were there, which was very cool. It was
Oh,
really a nice trip.
nice. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful area. Fantastic. That's really convenient too.
Oh my gosh.
Paris. Yeah.
So you were just on a little tour, yes?
Yes, I was out for a month doing private shows, and I just do them as a solo artist. Uh, I've done 3 months so far this year. I'll be back in November and do another month in U.S. and Canada. So same thing.
Very cool. Are they like house concerts or a little bit different than that?
Yes, they're mostly in people's homes, but often they might rent a small venue or even sometimes a large venue. Occasionally, I'll do a solo public show too and kind of mix it in. But I did this last month.
That's cool. I've done one house concert in my life, which was right before the pandemic hammer came down, and it was in Panama with this amazing blues artist from the U.S. who is actually coming to Querétaro at the beginning of next month, and he's playing. He was invited, just coincidentally, that I'm here, and he was invited to play the a 10th annual blues festival here in Querétaro, Mexico, and we are going to do a couple of house shows and kind of a public venue secret gig, so as not to steal thunder from the festival. But
For sure, sure. Hey, but so you're in Mexico right now? I was assuming. I
mhm.
was actually quite sure. Oh, okay, right on. Where is that? Querétaro? I can't even.
It is about a 3 hour drive. Oh my gosh, I haven't said this in so long. I'm forgetting. We are, I believe, northeast of Mexico City. About a three
Oh,
hour drive from Mexico City. So
oh, okay.
that's the closest big town we're close to. And then there's a famous Pueblo Mágico called San Miguel, or more these days known as San Miguel de Allende, which maybe you've heard of. We're
Oh,
pretty close to that as well.
oh,
Mm.
excellent. Okay, right on. How
Mhm.
long have you been there in that area?
About a year and a half. We were in Panama, my wife and I, 6 years before that, and then
Okay.
California in the San Francisco Bay Area, the South Bay Area for 17 before that. So
Oh,
I
wow.
heard.
Okay.
Oh no, I was thinking it was Les Claypool. How long have you been married, by the way?
We didn't have been married for 10 years.
Okay. I was just listening to a Les Claypool interview, and he had said he's been with his wife for like 30 years. I'm like, that's like me. But I was thinking for a second it was you that I read that about, but no, it's him.
Yeah, no, sadly, we kind of met, middle life, not early on.
Well, that's not sad. It's probably fantastic, right?
Well, it's wonderful that we met. So,
Yes, of course. I know what you meant.
absolutely.
I know what you meant. Yeah. You guys have a few kids too, don't you? Or
We
you
do. We
do.
have we have four together.
Very
So
nice.
yeah, four
You're
boys.
you're a busy dude. You guys are busy
Yeah,
parents.
we are cuatro hombres. So
Whoa, all boys. Well,
yeah.
hey, my mom had three boys, and she said girls were nothing but trouble, so you probably did pretty good.
That's
So
awesome.
real quick, tell me about if you don't mind, tell me about how you do your private events, or the anything that's outside the norm of what maybe the independent musician who hasn't quite reached the career heights that you have. It would be interesting to know. But the big thing I was kind of curious about, because
Mhm.
um, I've never had an artist like yourself do like I've never been a house show host for an artist like yourself. So I'm just kind of curious. The main thing was like, do you have like a flat fee that you do for them, or is it kind of a mix of like what a lot of indies do, where they do donation versus flat fee things?
Yeah, the way I do it is it kind of depends. So, because I do occasionally do one-off dates, and so I charge more for those just because it's obviously a bit more effort to get there and back. It's not, usually it means flying, but the ones that I'm doing when I'm kind of on the ground touring, and what I try to do is I try to route it in such a way when I'm playing 3 or 4 times a week, minimum.
Hmm.
And what I'll do is so for anyone listening, I think one of the most important things these days, I think especially, even historically, but especially these days, is having an email list of
Yeah.
people that enjoy your music, because that is the only true way of being able to connect to people directly, without having to rely on, Facebook or Instagram or whatever, platform of choice that you use. But because if one of those things go down, you lose all that connection. Yeah, the power of the email still, it's crazy. So yeah, what I do is I just have just up to this point kind of put it out there in the ether. I just email my email list and just say, hey, I'll be in such and such area at this time. Anybody interested? I charge about 2,200 for a show, if I can route it in that way. And I show up. I have my own PA system, all my gear, so it's kind of an all-in thing. And yeah, so that's basically how I do it.
So yeah, I figured that you would have like a fee that you charge for it, as opposed to trying to get into anything donation based, although that could maybe work out quite well too, depending on the situation. But
Yeah.
yes, and thanks for saying that about email. I talked to a lot of independent musicians, as you may have gathered, if you looked at the podcast. But it's surprising the number that don't focus much energy on that. And
Right.
everything you just said about it is something I really try to preach to them. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's because the email has been around for so long that I think a lot of people, especially younger artists, might think of it as being this antiquated thing you don't need anymore. But you have to get past that. And even Facebook is still important, even if you're a young artist, because of their ads platform that they have, because they have a tremendous amount of data. So when you're targeting things that are off the Facebook platform, you can still target people using their pixeling. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you may not think are that powerful that are truly still like even more important than you might even realize, with email being probably the number one thing that you want to drive people to.
Yeah.
So, because with that email address, then you can constantly reach out to people, you can nurture people, you can really kind of create that culture of who you are as an artist that that you're sharing with people on a regular basis. It's great.
When did you was Dishwalla kind of the beginning of your professional career?
Yeah. So, I mean, certainly on any kind of big label. I mean, we signed to A&M Records back in '94.
Okay,
So
so in
that's when it started.
'94, I'm guessing you weren't thinking a lot about your email, and I asked that
No.
question because I'm kind of curious. When did you to give? I don't know. I think this is kind of a valuable thing here, possibly as well. But when did you start thinking about that? Was it when you just became a solo artist, or before?
Well, I mean, when we would travel, I mean, we still, because email was relatively new at that point. I
Hmm.
mean, our first album came out in '95, so people remember AOL, if you were young
Hmm.
enough or old enough to remember that was, one of the biggest email providers, Yahoo, those kind of things. And that was really the only way to really connect to people directly at all. And then I think we kind of lost our focus on that. We had this massive email list, which I wish I still had, but I don't know, God
Does
knows what
anybody
that
have it?
went. No, not
That's
that I'm
sad.
aware of. I think it just, yeah, because I don't think we really did anything with it. That's the crazy thing. We collected tens of thousands of email names from people that had come to shows, or, had whatever connected with us in one form or fashion. And all those names are gone, of people that were true fans. So that's a drag. And so I think what happened was, it wasn't until maybe around the 2010 era, where at this point I'm an independent artist, no label at all. And I really got involved in, over the last 10 years, of really teaching myself e-commerce, and learning how to operate as an independent artist using tools that did not exist in the '90s. So it is a huge game changer, the way things are these days. You really don't need to be on a label. In fact, sometimes I think you can be on a label and make less money selling more records or more albums, more streams, than you would if you were independent, and selling less, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Between the the two phases of your career being like Dishwalla and then post Dishwalla, how long was that something you just instantly started working on as an independent artist? And to put it in perspective for me, what year was that you became into like a solo artist rather?
Sure, sure. So I did 5 albums with Dishwalla, and then we our label folded in 2006, and the band broke up. A couple of the guys had quit. We were in a bit of a hiatus at that point, kind of drifting. But because I was the principal songwriter in the band, I just continued to write songs, not knowing what I would do with them. And after about 3 years, it was like, gosh, obviously Dishwalla's not doing anything. So I just went ahead and started recording my first solo album, which is something I wanted to do, for a long time. So I released my first solo album in 2009.
Wow. So I forgot to say, well, I shouldn't say I forgot to say, I didn't intend to say it straight off. And I don't know if I'd said as much before during the brief time that we've been connected, but a big fan of the work with Dishwalla. And I very recently discovered, and in fact, when I contacted you, I just discovered all this work that you've done, and it all sounds fantastic. And congratulations on your forthcoming 10th album. Maybe you can get me up to speed on it. From what I had read, you have, well, I wrote down the second song, but it looks like the first. You have a song called Alive that's mixed. I was actually trying to purchase a preview copy from Bandcamp, but for some reason I was getting a weird error, which I'm sure was a Bandcamp thing, or maybe it's not available at the moment. But
no,
yeah.
It's not. I might have to look at the pre-order thing on that. But yeah, So I have 2 songs that are done. So because I have quite a few people that have pre-ordered the album, and it's been taking longer to finish. I mean, COVID hasn't helped, and various other stuff that's been going on, and that life will throw your way. But I'm getting it done, and yeah. So I've mixed 2 songs. One song's called "Safe and Sound," and another song called "Alive." And so I've been sharing, little snippets of it. But then anybody who's pre-ordered the album has already received, the MP3 early mixes of these things. So
Okay.
So they're getting something that they can actually listen to,
Yeah.
while I still continue to try to finish this thing.
What's your projected date to finish it?
Good question. Right now it's so close. I was hoping to do it by the end of this year, but I'm guessing it'll be beginning of, early next year. We'll actually be officially finished.
All right, I'll pre-order it. No, so I gather that you are have done some production or work as a producer. Are you self-producing this one?
I am. I mean, I produced most of the Dishwalla stuff or
Uh-huh.
co-produced it. And especially when you're a songwriter too, I think you tend to have a pretty good idea of how you want things to go. So I like to be kind of heavy-handed in that process. Even if the band had an official producer on the record, we would always be co-producing the projects or the albums we were doing. And then every solo album I've done, which have been 4 now, I produced myself. And yeah, I've worked with quite a few artists, co-writing and producing and recording stuff for various people.
All right, I didn't realize that you were so hands-on in Dishwalla as well.
Oh yeah, dude, I'm a total control freak. So
nice.
Yes, very
I
heavy-handed.
listened to the snippet of Alive. It sounds great. I'm like, oh, this is going to be like kind of more of like a band sounding thing. And I haven't listened to all of your solo work, but I listened to a lot of it. And it's kind of Americana, a lot of it, maybe not all of it. But so yeah, I was like, oh, this is great. I get to hear drums and guitars and whatnot. But I'm looking forward to hearing it, and perhaps I too will pre-order so I can hear those songs, because I really was interested in hearing the whole thing. So
Yeah. It should be a lot of variety. I try not to make records that sound too samey. Yeah, you should get a good variety of things coming back at you with this record.
very cool. I read that you grew up in Santa Barbara. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
How much of your life did you spend there? A lot, most of it, or?
Most of it, yeah. That's where my wife Min and I met, in Santa Barbara. I mean, I obviously early on, in my early 20s, I started touring, so I wasn't around for much of, the probably 20 years following that. And a lot of it was spent on the road. I think there was a period there where I didn't even really have an address. It was just my parents' house in Santa Barbara because I was living on a tour bus or a hotel room.
Do you? I'm curious to know. Do you have any favorite? I'm sure you do. What favorite memories can you share from all these exploits touring? Be them with Dishwalla or as a solo artist?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, gosh, there are so many cool things that have gone by, interesting things. Um, yeah, trying to think, what's something that's a top thing that I think of. We won a Billboard award in 1997 or 98. I can't remember what it was, and we were up against Metallica of all people, and won Rock Song of the Year and performed live on the show, which was cool, and beat Metallica, which is pretty awesome. Bless them, good band. So yeah, that was pretty fantastic moment. In fact, I remember sitting in the playing live at the Billboard Awards, and it's big, massive venue that they use in Vegas to film and do this whole thing live, and the whole front row was just filled with hugely famous people. It's like me singing 5 feet away from Mariah Carey and Sting and Santana, and it was just a wild experience. And then just hearing yourself on the radio or in an elevator.
7-Eleven.
Yeah, exactly. Just this weird 7-Eleven, exactly. Those weird kind of moments, are pretty magical.
Well, that's quite a it's quite a span of memories too. I think the one interview I managed to find, I'm sure there are more, but the one that I found of you with some radio station, I probably have a link to it. But you had brought up, I think, that Billboard performance, and you said at the time your feeling was this, like, the people in the front row that are all hugely famous were kind of looking like, who are these crazy kids?
Yeah, obviously, you figure somebody like Sting or Janet Jackson or Mariah Carey, all these people that's their life, is being in those things, and they're kind of expected to sit there. Those award shows are interesting because the half of the theater that's closest to the stage are all industry people, a lot of artists, and of course a lot of just industry folks, and then the second half of the theater are actual people that bought tickets to come and actually see the people perform. So it's a weird way to perform, because all those first rows, everybody's very serious, and they don't act like an audience. They're just kind of staring at you with odd looks on their faces, but then deep, but you can hear people screaming farther in the back, and
it's so weird.
It's weird. Yeah,
I was thinking that if I were one of those people in the front row industry, I would at least fake it, like, hey, these guys are good, come on.
If they were, I don't really remember. I just kind of phased them out so that because I try not to be distracted, staring. But I know that, well, interesting enough, because Santana was there, and this is right before Santana had gone to do that solo record that he did, where he had
like Supernatural.
Yeah, exactly. All of that. So he contacted us, the band, wanting to know if we would back him up for a tour that he was doing, and some big kind of high profile shows. And unfortunately, we were already, booked and committed to having to do these various tours. But that was after he saw us play live. So I thought, okay, he clearly thought we were decent musicians if he was asking us to back him up. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Nice invitation indeed.
Yeah. It would have been cool to have been able to work on a song with him and have been on that record, like Rob Thomas did. That was, such a big record, such a great song.
Yeah, that may have been a career launcher for Rob Thomas.
Yeah, certainly as a soloist too. That took him over the top, and brought Santana back into the limelight, because he doesn't sing, right? He just plays guitar, so it worked really well.
Yeah, It did indeed. So,
Yeah.
do you have any plans for touring, or are you thinking about it when the new album comes out? And if you do, would that be possibly with a band, or will you continue doing more small things, or does it depend?
Probably a bit of both. I mean, I'm going to be in the Philippines next year doing a like a month tour. That's a full band thing. It's just kind of depends on the economics of it. Obviously, playing with a full band is much more cost orientated than just playing solo. So it just kind of depends on the availability and how the market has changed. Because one of the reasons I started doing the solo thing was because of COVID. So that had shut all of the venues were shut down, all the recording studios. There's really no place to go and do anything. So a friend of mine, Brian Vander Ark, who's in this band, the Verve Pipe, he's a friend of mine, and we were talking, and he's like, "Gosh, I've been doing these solo things since 2010, and that's all I do right now because I can go into a small environment, you can control it, you don't have to get permission, and he's like, it's just kind of keeping me alive right now." So that's when I started doing that.
That's cool. Is that he's the singer from the Verve?
Yeah,
Is
Brian Van Dork, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Is he England based, or is he in the U.S.?
No, I think he's in Michigan. I think he's in Michigan.
Why? Just kidding.
He might just where he started, I guess.
Yeah, well, he may be from there. I actually, I will hear artists. Well, Eminem comes to mind, but there's a bunch of them who they stay in their hometown. Well, Prince, right? They stay in their hometown, and I get that. I totally get that, and especially if they're kind of championing their hometown too. But otherwise, I think of some of these places, I'm like, why would anybody live there?
Yeah, well, I think part of it too is that sometimes a lot of those, especially bands like the Verve Pipe, they started in that area, so they have their fan base is really deep and solid in that area because they started and really kind of grassroots their way, and then they had a couple really big hits. So obviously they have fans all around the world now, but it's easy for them to tour because they can play in the Midwest area and just fill places really, really easy for them.
As a solo artist, are your fans sort of concentrated in any area or areas?
Areas, yeah. It kind of depends on the country and then certain parts of those countries, if they're big countries. But we were one of those bands, certainly from Dishwalla, where we could do really well in one country and the country adjacent has never heard of us. So, you just, it's, I don't know, it's just one of those things that kind of happens for various reasons. But we were, huge in some places and non-existent in people's minds in places right next door.
Wow. Maybe, I wonder if that is like a music scene dependent thing as well, because like this blues artist that I mentioned who's coming to Querétaro, and he's kind of a road dog, so he's always playing places, and he's got some albums, and he's obviously does a ton of stuff in the US, and then he's I don't know if it's like the third or fifth time he does these tours in Japan too, and there's like an intense blues, sort of Chicago style blues scene going on in Japan apparently. So
yeah, I totally believe that. The Japanese are really, they really get into unexpected niche types of music scenes from all different periods, and when they go deep, when they're into it, they go deep. I mean, they're like fully committed, man. It's awesome, like the rockabilly scene or just blues, just wild, and they love it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I always thought it would be cool or funny and cool to be able to say as a music artist, oh yeah, we're huge in Japan, and I don't know where that comes from, if it's like a Spinal Tap thing or having watched Bon Jovi and people of his ilk come up in the world where they seriously established themselves in Japan and then became big. But I don't know, it's a little funny, but also just like great. I mean, Johnny, my friend Johnny, the guitarist, singer that I was talking about, he just loves it, and he just finished a tour there and then coming here. So all right, so
cool. That's so cool.
Yeah. Okay, some more questions about you as a solo artist and sort of like the things that that you've learned? We talked about, you went right away and talked about email, which was great. I know
Yeah.
you've also put a lot of focus, or at least a significant amount, in your website to be like a
Mhm.
controllable portal, if you will, or part of your whole fan supporter funnel. But are there things in the time that you've been doing this that I'm guessing maybe the answer lies partly in social media, but are there things that have changed since you've been a solo artist that you're keeping an eye on, or maybe even things that you see coming as a solo artist? And I'm sort of asking in terms of like the trends that you see as being helpful to be aware of, or changes that you kind of reflect on as having been helpful to be aware of as a solo artist.
The interesting thing about music is the constant change in formats. So and so I think, trying to keep an eye on, as the format changes, like what is going to be the next thing. Clearly, right now, streaming is taking over, and just even the idea of being able to download songs and things like that. That was kind of the new thing when Napster started. That dramatically changed and restructured how distribution happens and how people find music. With Spotify and that style, Apple Music, those kind of things, that's going to be primarily where people are going to be listening to music for a while, as well as all of these different platforms like Instagram and TikTok and those different ways, YouTube still, of how other places where people find music. Because that's a big part of it is, as an artist these days, it's understanding that there are 8.5 billion people on this planet. So there is an audience for you. It's just a matter of getting your music in front of them. There are so many great ways you can do that now. And that's how people are finding new music, is because they see somebody, do a cat video, but it's got a really cool song to it. And when you look at that little clip of whatever that song is, or that little snippet or reel or whatever it might be, it will use it by law now, how the way they structure everything licensing wise, it will tell you what that song is and who the artist is doing it. So and you can save it, you can immediately find it. So that is really, really big, powerful way of connecting right now. And so if I were an artist right now, I'd really be focused on ways of finding what platforms work really well for you and how to be able to share your music that way and find those fans and get their email addresses. That's the number one.
Yep, indeed. So, and that's in large part what you're talking about is from a discovery as it relates to search, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And it's because the algorithms, and with AI and those kind of things now, that if for example, if somebody streams a song on YouTube, YouTube is going to immediately suggest a lot of other videos that it thinks that you will like based on what you've been doing. All of the platforms are doing that now. So, by really trying to mark everything you do by using hashtags or
even the sort of embedded tags, I would imagine, like when you, if, for instance, if you put something on
all
YouTube,
of that stuff. Mm-hmm. Plus, it's getting so smart now, you don't even really have to do that. It's like the algorithms are really incredibly smart at figuring out that if somebody likes this, they're probably going to like this. And the more information they get about us as individuals and see our habits, because they're tracking everything that we're doing, which is a bit scary on one end, but in terms of being an artist these days, is really quite helpful because, like for example, Spotify has a new thing that they're doing that has to do with creating campaigns where they actually will go, and I think you have to be streaming enough to be able to qualify for it, because I think it's still somewhat in a beta type of thing, but they actually will create a campaign where they are actively going out and finding people that will be interested in the music that you're doing based on what they listen to. So, and the interest, and you wonder why would they do that for free? Why would they, just do that without you asking them and create this service where they offer that? Because it's hugely helpful. It's literally going out and finding fans of your music for you within Spotify. I'll tell you, it's called Discovery Mode. And Discovery Mode is fantastic because the way that it works is for every person that they get that's new, that has never been in your universe before, streaming you, if they're a new person, that they can connect to them introducing you to them while they're streaming other artists, and they stream you and they listen to you all the way, or they like you, or they save you, they add you to a playlist, they will take a 30% or 33% part of your streaming royalty that you'd be paid. They actually keep. But
that's a big commission.
Right. But if you look at it, because of the amount of new streams you get, you actually are still they're generally kind of tripling the amount of additional streams, and they're taking a third of that. So you're actually getting 66% more revenue coming to you for doing nothing. And you're also now gaining new fans that have entered into your universe, and that if you've got yourself dialed in Spotify, they can find your website, they can find your albums, they're of course now introduced to your whole catalog of music that you hopefully have on there. So it's awesome. I mean, because otherwise you realize if you're trying to get yourself out to other people, you're having to pay to shoot ads out, or to get your song put in front of people's faces as they're scrolling through their feeds and those kind of things. You'd be paying for that anyway. This way, you only pay a percentage for things that actually happen, and you don't have to do any of the work. They're doing it all for you. It's really cool.
Nice. And am I safe in assuming that you are able to include the work from Dishwalla, which I assume is kind of the stronger part of all your streams, or are you completely separate from that?
I am unfortunately completely separate from that because recording all of those original albums, this is a huge issue if you pay attention to any of the stuff that Taylor Swift will talk about, because she ran into this as well. All of the albums that I did with Dishwalla, except for one, which I actually own, the last album I did with Dishwalla, I actually own that physically. But the label, because they are the ones putting out the money, they actually own the physical recording of all of those albums. They may not own the songs because the people that wrote them, or the publishing, but they actually own the recording, which is the majority of the money made when you get something streamed, or you sell a CD, or you sell a download. So it's about 80% of the money is going to the person who owns the master, the physical master recording. So in order to be able to be in discovery mode, you have to own your own masters in order to do that. But if you're an independent artist, most of them these days do that, unless you're signed to a label.
If you're signed to a label, is there any way around it? As far as
it's hopefully one more thing you can do is try to reach it, because unfortunately a lot of the big labels suck. They are so behind the times on what's going on. They're still trying to operate in these old school ways of doing things, and they still sell albums obviously, and it's still effective, but there's a lot of money and a lot of connections with an audience that's just being left on the table. But if you were able to reach out to somebody at the label and say, hey, can you, obviously our stuff is being streamed on Spotify, can you then go and set up the discovery mode section and utilize that? Because it's something you have to do on a monthly basis. You choose the songs you want to put towards discovery mode based on the songs that qualify. So and then obviously if songs are not responding, like they're putting them out in front of people, but people for some reason are not responding, but other songs they are, then you want to take those songs down and maybe try other ones. So it's a month by month process that you keep fine tuning. But I'm sure that if you've got a good relationship with your label, you can reach out to them and say, please set this up, or create an environment where I can control this.
So you would, even if you're getting you are getting a percentage of that stuff from Dishwalla in this context that we're talking about, but it's just not the same as your own stuff, right? Because
So unfortunately, with the discovery mode for Dishwalla is not happening. Nobody's doing that because there's nobody there kind of controlling that, unfortunately, because the labels own those masters, and our label for the first two albums doesn't even technically exist. There's nobody running it. It all got sucked into Universal. So it kind of is what it is. Luckily the band is big enough, and we probably have a 500,000 to 600,000 monthly listeners, right? Which is a lot. So there's a lot of organic sharing that goes on. But if you're an independent artist and you're a lot less than that, you're obviously trying to get your stuff out there, and that can make or break you. So as an indie, everything I've done independently, I actually have control over, which is cool.
That is, something you said is interesting to me because I was listening. I'm trying to find his name. I think I heard him on the Tim Ferriss show, and he, boy, the guy's had such an interesting career. The thing I remember that he has done he was one of the execs at Ledger, the hardware wallet for Bitcoin. But he'd worked a lot in the digital music space in the early days, and he was talking about some of the early meetings with a label or labels, and this is right when Napster was happening, I think, and they were just like, "No, we're going to sell CDs forever. We're not interested." And it sounds like they're still, maybe they're not stuck on CDs, but they're still. You said yourself they're very behind the times still.
Yeah. I mean, because obviously physical product is there's comparatively there's very little of that going, and it's primarily streaming. I mean, there'll be times where there's, what's the way to explain it? Like you'll see resurgences of certain types of formats, like LPs, or you might see CDs even too.
Cassettes even.
And a lot of times people are even young kids are buying these things not necessarily to play because they have a CD player, but just because they want to have something cool and physical, and they think it's cool, because it's an old format. But it's also an actual physical thing they've got in their hand that the artist can sign, or they can keep as a memento. It's different when you're streaming and you don't actually really even own it. It's just something you press play on and stream it live. It's a weird way to kind of play something, because you're kind of borrowing it or leasing it or renting it. It's if you don't have a good connection, you're kind of screwed because you can't play it. You're not limited by that if you actually have at the very least downloaded the track, and you can play it off your own hard drive.
Right. And, I've sort of in the back of my mind realized this, but I was talking to this gal named Susan Rogers, who has had a long career in production and engineering, and now she's in academia, focused on how neurologically, why and how we consume music. But one thing she commented on that rings very true, of course, and it has for a while, and I know you've been around long enough to remember when we would actually sit down to listen to music, maybe with headphones, and you were listening to music because that's what you were doing. But now she's noticed the obvious, that the way music is consumed is completely different, in that, like, it's often just like something you hear while you're doing something else, or you listen to while you're doing something else, or something in the background, and so kind of strange.
Well, yeah, it's much more convenient to do that because it's so easy to play stuff just from your phone. So you're always carrying a music system around with you.
Yep. Yeah, indeed. Let's see. I wanted to touch on email again, because I know a portion of my audience, a pretty good portion of my audience, has expressed interest in email marketing. So obviously there's the get on top of collecting emails. And then we have to stay in touch, right? But are there, and I'm assuming that people who've expressed interest in it to me from the listener and subscriber group, they've kind of gotten started, but they want to get better at it. Are there things that you've learned that you could share that have helped you in creating the business around your music where email marketing is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, there's the kind of typical old school style of marketing where you get somebody's email address because they saw you at a live show, and then you're sending them updates, over the year, right? And some people send an update every 6 months, which I don't recommend. It's good to be current. You want to always be kind of nurturing people and keeping them aware of what you're doing, especially if they showed some interest. But then there's the farther deeper things that you can do, and I'll give you an example. Like if you have a store where people can buy something from you, for example, right? They'll say they purchase a CD and you ship it to them. Well, when they do that, in order to send them a receipt, you immediately are going to you need to collect their email address in order to be able to send them a receipt, maybe tell them when it's shipped, those kind of things. So what I do is when somebody buys something, especially if it's the first time, I use, you get a good email provider like MailChimp or Drip, which is actually a little better. And I start to send, as soon as they buy something, I will start to send them a whole campaign of pre-written emails that kind of tell them a little bit more about myself, check in to make sure that the CD has arrived, those kind of things. I might even introduce them to other things, give them discounts, offer free downloads. There's a lot that you can really do. Tell them a little bit more about my history, those kind of things. Maybe even send them some free songs that are, a rare B-side single or an acoustic version of this or that. And I literally will have a campaign that goes for 3 or 4 months that just sends them emails. And that's just to really kind of get people more engaged. The idea being that the people that you get email addresses from, you want them to be engaged in what you're doing. Ideally, if they're not, they're going to unsubscribe because you pay for how many emails you have with an email provider. So you want the people that are on your email list to be active, so that, say, if you release a new song or a new album, you can immediately then reach out to those people, and they're really kind of familiar with your whole culture and vibe, and they're in it, and so they immediately go out and buy it or pre-order or whatever, or if you have a live show, any of those things. So that's kind of one example, but I have all kinds of email campaigns that I have set up for different situations, depending on when people enter into my universe and give me their email address, depending on where they came from and why. I send them a whole engagement thing that is pre-written, that with hopes that they'll become even more into my whole music thing.
When you developed those campaigns, and maybe you've been doing it over years now, but I assume you did some reading, like what are some good things to do here? And you mentioned the merge, that's obviously good. But when you think of things like a pre-written campaign, depending on the scenario, are there situations where you might look at things you've sent more in a broadcast manner that can be a theme for a campaign? Or how do you get inspiration how have you gotten inspiration for campaigns that fit different scenarios that might last a month or 2 months or 3 months, like you said?
Right. Well, I mean, part of it is just, there are a lot of resources out there for learning how to do that, because it kind of comes from your basic world of e-commerce, whether you're selling, a book or music. It's the same kind of ideas, and it's just learning how to create content that is interesting to people, that is relative to what you're doing and trying to sell. I mean, if you're an artist, you're trying to sell yourself as like a whole, kind of create a whole culture around your music and who you are. So it's just learning how to do that. And so I highly recommend people looking at e-commerce courses, that there's a million of them out there, and just kind of learn the basics of how people, sell things, because that's what we're doing. but also doing it more with that focus on being an artist, and not making it feel so selly, and making it feel more like, you're in a cool club that people, if they like your music, they want to be a part of.
Right. And speaking of selling things, when you do the type of tours that we open our conversation with, does merch at the events, whether it's physically available there, something that you're able to travel with, or something they can order online, does that play much into those type of shows, or do you leave merch more to all e-commerce based trend, basically promoted via online as opposed to in-person engagements?
I do both. Sometimes it depends upon the show, but I do both things. So I always have merch with me. I don't carry a tremendous amount, but at least, like CDs, and I even have some albums that are available on vinyl. But t-shirts are too tough, because you don't want to carry a lot of that around with you. People can buy that online. And then it's easy these days with an iPhone, because people can buy stuff with a credit card.
right then and there. And then, of course, again, you've now captured their email address, right, in that process. So, tech-wise, it's amazing because, back in the day, it was really difficult to sell merchandise unless, especially with using a credit card, because it required, a lot of, gear and tech in order to pull that off. But nowadays, if you've got an iPhone, you're good to go. You can set up an account and people can pay you that way. So yeah, it's I highly recommend it. You can make a lot of money on merch. And some nights you'll sell a lot, some nights you won't, but it can really be a deal breaker in terms of making enough money to be able to go out and perform live and not have it bankrupt you.
What are you looking forward to besides that album that you're looking to get out early next year? What are you looking forward to in the coming months?
Well, I'm looking forward to doing that. I've got other things that I'm doing. As soon as I finish this next album, then I'm also putting out a relaxation album, which is kind of totally different thing. So it's not going to be big lyric heavy album. It's going to be more just about just kind of more of a vibe album. And I'm putting out a course for people who it's called the Touring Singer. So it's for singers who, whether they play occasionally on at the corner pub, or if they're performing every night in front of 100,000 people. It's just a whole program designed to kind of help you and guide you through how to be able to sing the best you can and be as prepared as possible and deal with all the craziness that may come your way, so that you can be the best singer you can possibly be in all these different situations.
That sounds great. I love it. I know everyone can find all the stuff that you're doing at jrrichardsmusic.com, and you got all your socials there. So good luck on getting the album out. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I really appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your day with your kid.
Okay, man. Hey, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to what I have to say and sharing it. I totally appreciate it, man. It's awesome.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Big fan. So enjoy, man. Talk to you soon.
Bro.
This episode was powered by Podcast Startup. If you feel you need a little help with that podcast you're contemplating, Podcast Startup may be just the thing for you. Podcast Startup is a program designed for new podcasters. Did you know that most podcasts don't make it past their first few episodes? That's right. They start, they stall, and then they die. Sustaining a podcast ain't easy. It's commitment. A lack of planning and misaligned expectations are a recipe for fast burnout and fade out for podcasters. This is exactly the kind of thing that Podcast Startup was designed to help you with. If you're intrigued, if you want to start a podcast the right way, go to unstarvingmusician.com/podcast startup to learn more and to receive free podcast startup tips from yours truly. Thank you for listening. You can leave us feedback, questions, comments, complaints at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you love this podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowdsponsor to learn about the many ways of showing your love and support. Your support does indeed equal love. The series music you heard in this episode is New Gods Part 2 by yours truly. Find links for all the places to hear the full version with vocals by yours truly at rabonzo.com. If you do not yet have a website for your music, check out Bandzoogle. It was created to help musicians and bands build their website and manage direct-to-fan marketing and sales. Bandzoogle has amazing design options, a commission-free store to sell music, merch, tickets, and more, plus tools that can capture detailed fan data for you. Try it at bandzoogle.com. Use the promo code ROBONZO, that's ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. Find links for all the people and things talked about in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com. Peace, love, and a whole lot of gratitude.